Free Burma Rangers movie for Hallmark. I know exactly where you're going with this.
Man, I could be watching Sonic the Hedgehog.
That's right, that's right, that's right. But along the lines of Free Burma Rangers, Pastor Harry ran across a really neat article. It's called Frontline Focus. And it talks about the Rangers and some of the work that they're doing with refugees. I have 4 copies here that Pastor Harry has put together. He wanted me to pass them out. So if anybody wants this, please help yourself to it.
We can make more.
And we can make more.
You have the original still, right?
I have the original,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
Does it have the schedule for the movie on it?
And, no, along the lines of the movie, I also texted Shane Manny about things, and he said that they believe the movie's going to go to Netflix after the showing. So, and I asked him, I said, when you get that word, would you please let me know, and then I'll let you guys know, and then maybe we could do a showing through Netflix. So he thinks that's going to be the road that it's going to take. So that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll keep you guys posted if I hear anything from Shane in regards to that. Let's pray. Father, thank you for these men. Thank you for this time. Even though it's such a short bleep in our week together, it's just also a very precious time to be together. And we ask, Father, that your Spirit would come in our midst, that you would speak to us through your word, through each other, and may we be encouraged as we understand and realize who you are and how much you love us. We commit this time to you, for we pray these things in your name. Amen. As we have been following the book titled Way of the Wild Heart, John Eldredge, we're now in the 4th stage in the masculine journey called the lover. A couple of bullet points that he brought out that I think are real important. Number 1, the danger for the warrior is not defeat, but success. If the evil one can't take him out of the battle, can't keep him from entering the battle, then he will bury him in battles. I thought that was real interesting in regards to it. But this next statement, I think, is really key to this journey. At the core of the lover is not his girl. That's not the core. But something greater than him or her. And this is what he talks about. He talks about being captivated by beauty. And what does that mean? I'll never forget an experience I had. This was quite a number of years ago with some men. I was invited out to Northern California to hunt the black-tailed deer. And we had set up camp, and I had no idea where I was. I flew into San Francisco and then did a little commuter from San Francisco up above into Medford, Oregon, and then they picked me up, and then we traveled south down into California. And when we got there, it was dark, so I had no idea where we were. The camp that we had set up, the base camp was about at 10,000 feet. We're up in the boonies kind of thing, and there was only 4 or 5 of us who were there. The next morning, when we woke up, and we got up real early, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. Again, I had no idea what the plan was. The guys said to me, "Jim, you go with me," this one guy. And I was to follow him. And so I'm going with him. Other guys are going here. You know, we're going all over the place. And it was pitch black at that time of the morning. I mean black. And we're trekking up mountains, and you could hear animals around you, but you couldn't see anything. I mean, it was that dark. And then we got up to like a little plateau, and my friend said to me, Jim, you're gonna go over there, find a spot to sit down, and I'll be over this way. I went over there and I sat down, and I had no idea what was gonna be before me. As the sun rose, as I'm sitting there, right in front of me is Mount Shasta. If you know anything about Mount Shasta, it's a mountain over 14,000 feet up. Absolutely phenomenal. And it was right in front of me. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching the sun come right up behind Mount Shasta. I could care less at that point if I saw a black-tailed deer. Because something had captivated me. Something had pulled me in. And I had no idea that that was there. That's what was going to be before me. Just take a couple of minutes with a partner and define what you believe is beauty. All right? Just take a couple minutes with a partner, somebody around. What is beauty?
Yeah, he just mentioned that. I did a flashback on me.
Give you one more minute, and then we'll regroup.
Sometimes use like a hitching or something. It's like around you and you're not even paying attention, and then all of a sudden it's like.
Okay, guys, let me regroup it. Again, what Eldridge is not saying, he's not excluding the female. He's not excluding that, but he's saying something is deeper beyond that. And he calls it a fork in the road. And many times, as men, we overlook the fork or we bypass the fork in the road, this thing that's before us. What did you guys talk about? What is beauty? Anybody?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Okay?
Depending on whether we look through or look at whoever,
Uh-huh.
with a heavenly perspective or a worldly perspective.
Yep. So you're talking about sight then, right, Colin? That's a very important part of that aspect, beauty, sight. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Yes, Bob.
What really catches me, and you see these a lot of ads on TV, is like a little Down syndrome girl going to the prom or something with a big smile on her face. And and then these other girls that were prom queen go over and give her the queen, or someone with a handicap. You see this on Facebook a lot. I can't get no one will wish me a happy birthday because of my handicap. And, there's a big smile on their face.
Welcome, Mark.
To me, that is God's beauty right there.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of it, I think of purely aesthetic beauty.
Uh-huh.
So not, the beauty of a kind act and things, that's all beautiful too, but just looking at something and seeing something that looks beautiful. And Harry and I both talked about the moments that we thought of, which were basically being somewhere where you're away from the lights of the town and the city and seeing the stars in the sky. And, captivated by the beauty of the nighttime sky and the horizon and things like that. And what was interesting for me is when I was a teenager, my friends and I would go to this place, we called it The View.
Mm-hmm.
But what it brought out in us was something that nothing else brought out in us, which was all of a sudden we're talking about the meaning of life and philosophizing about, we're dumb, we didn't know what we were talking about, but we never talked about that stuff. That was like not a thing. It's all cowboy, warrior, conquering, whatever, and all of a sudden we're all looking at the stars and like, oh, and so it was really interesting how the view of that, something that looks beautiful, and I would take a little bit exception with the phrase "beauty's in the eye of the beholder." I get it, I understand that thing,
Right.
but I think there's objective beauty
Mm-hmm.
that God created, that this is beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone agrees, and that's the kind of thing I think about.
Mm-hmm. So what would be the purpose of beauty? Nevin's scratching on it.
I was gonna kind of piggyback off of Nevin, looking deeper into it, not just the aesthetics, but saying, wow, when you wake up, when you're talking about seeing a sunrise behind that mountain, it's like really seeing the beauty, being captivated by it, but seeing something more than just the appearance, going deeper when
You're scratching right on it, Colin.
when you look at, for you guys, since I'm still single, y'all are married, when you look at your wife and you see more than just her appearance, you see her heart, her character, her intentions, that's maybe what he may be getting at,
Uh-huh.
and that's something I've been picking up little bits and
Uh-huh.
pieces.
Yeah. So beauty, go ahead, Mark,
God's creation.
takes us where?
Created her.
What's that?
He created her, just like he created Eve
Yes.
for Adam.
Yes.
And it was like that one focus. He only had Eve. That was all his. No distractions.
Yes.
It was like, that was it.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Focused.
The focus, but but you're scratching on it, Colin. It takes you deeper, right? To the one who created it. And that's the purpose of beauty. If it doesn't take you there, then it becomes, in some ways, it can become idolatrous, because that becomes the end point rather than something much bigger in regards to it. So that's the purpose of beauty and what he's talking about. Awakening, Eldridge calls this, he says it's an ache for something more, kind of what you were talking about, something deeper, often expressed in music, poetry, film, a book, nature. He calls it like a second birth. Something is awakening within you as a result of this experience, this thing that's happening to you. And as you are awakened, it's taking you, and I like that word, Colin, deeper, to something more. And that is so significant in the process when you're thinking about beauty and the process of what is the purpose of beauty. Why do we need to get captivated by that? Because we need to see something more than just ourselves or what's happening. And that change, that shift is so important. if you guys would take, I need somebody to take Psalm 42 verses 1 through 3, and then Psalm 63, 1 and 3, and Psalm 27, verse 4.
I've got 27 already up.
Okay, that's where I wanted to start, so that's perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Psalm 27:4. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and seek him in his temple.
Mm-hmm.
I have 42, 1 and 3. As the deer pants for the streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God, and I can go and meet with God. My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, where is your God?
And if you read the rest of that psalm, have you read it? Is the psalmist going through an easy time? No. Look at verse 6. I am deeply depressed. Therefore, I remember you. Deep calls, verse 7, deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls. Lord, will you send his faithful love by day? Verse 9, I will say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why must I go about in sorrow because of the enemy's oppression? My adversaries taunt me as if crushing my bones, while all day long they say to me, where is your God? What's going on with the psalmist? Is he captivated by beauty? No, there's a struggle, but what is again the purpose? How can a person get to that point in their life where they, as he says in verse 1, as the deer longs for streams of water, so I long for who? Not my wife, not my friends, for you, O God. 63, verse 1 and verse 3.
I got it. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you. In the dry and weary land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary, and behold your power and your glory, because your love is better than life. My lips will glorify you.
Amen. Tonight, I want you to flip the focus. Being romanced by the romancer. Who's the one who's being romanced? It's us, right? Being romanced. And who is the romancer? And what does that mean? I want to just read a portion, and if you have your book, you guys can follow along with me, starting on page 191. I'll read it just for sake. He's talking about an experience one of his friends, a colleague, at the bottom of 191. Brian, a colleague, had recently had his world turned upside down. Long has he lived in the realms of love for God means service for God. It's very, very dangerous. And as an intellectual man, his career most recently has been with the computer industry. Then came, he says, the romancer. Let me read it for you. Something has changed. The world is not quite as it seemed. It began with small things, a longer, deep sigh when I looked at the mountains, stopping the car on the side of the road to watch the sunset, seeking beauty at an art festival in Santa Fe. After some weeks, I began to hear him whisper, I am here. Have you seen me? It's the purpose of beauty, right? Well, you said, Colin, it takes you deeper. Do you want to see me more? Slowly, I was taken off guard. My heart began to rest. my eyes were opening to the mysteries and beauty of God, I began to realize that He cared for my heart. Me, the very core of who you and I are, right? It's our heart. That's our core. With it. All the other stuff is a facade. It's who we are. God was pursuing me, wooing me. My pursuit of beauty had turned around on me. It had become God's pursuit of me. I then realized what I was seeing, and it broke me to tears. God was acting as if He was in love with me. Just think about that thought. And I'm not getting perverted with this stuff. There's no perversion to this. I hope you understand that. It could easily be twisted that way, but that's not what he's talking about. A friend of mine named Lisa bought an ornate dagger which she named Beauty, because nothing pierces the soul like beauty. This is a foreshadowing of God's plan for me. He intended beauty to cut me deeply. Through conversations in the presence of this graceful woman, in the presence of a holy, beautiful, and righteous God, He took my heart to every struggle I ever had to find love in Eve. Going to the wrong place. I was overwhelmed. God spoke to a heartbroken adolescent boy that love was not lost those many years ago. Love was not to be found in Lisa tonight, and it was not to be found when I had worked hard enough to have a great marriage. I saw the beauty and glory of deep abiding in Him. Every place I had sought love, every place I had found it, have all been Him. His heart for me is greater than I ever knew, and I am learning to lean into that. My heart rests more now than it used to. It knows that not everything is a fight. Much of life is simply a romance. For you and I to think about it that way, it's different. When I read this, it was like, whoa. It kind of caught me off guard. Even though I had read the book before, and now reading it again, it really caught me off guard. Like, the script is being flipped here. And it's not about me. It's about Him. And Him romancing me. And what does that look like? For Him to love me. My heart. All the good, the bad. I used to like Clint Eastwood's movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's a real good descriptive of Jim Dressler. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Because that's the book. That's where it's at. And yet, to find someone who wants to romance me, because he's interested in my heart and your heart. And it just kind of like, whoa. And it made me put the brakes on. I couldn't go beyond that because I didn't know where to go from beyond that. For me to allow myself to be romanced. I'm supposed to be the romancer, right? I'm the man. But that's not what the relationship with Christ is all about. It's Him pursuing us, me. And why does He love me so that He wants to do that? And what Eldridge does in this chapter is kind of, he talks about, the relationship with your girl, with your wife, and how key that is. But if we miss this part, which is its very core, then we miss it. Because this is the core. This is the foundation of the lover stage, to be able to know that I am loved by the Creator. And through beauty, whatever that is, in film, book, whatever captivates you, is to take you, in Colin's words, deeper to something else. Phil.
In Romans 1:20, it says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." Now, not just to simply quote scripture. I mean, whatever one defines beauty as, whether it's the Mona Lisa hanging in the Louvre in Paris, a landscape, music, or whatever, even if it's something quote unquote made or created by man, if you will, who is it who put the talent in that artist's or architect's
That's the
capability in his hand?
Exactly.
So if you think about it, whether you are captivated by the sight of a interesting freeway overpass or the landscape in which it stands, both would trace their lineage and existence back to God's glory anyhow.
Yes.
So when
Yep.
you look, I had an interesting experience similar to you. When I started my job, I flew up to Colorado a few days earlier, and one of the best experiences I had was being able to stop and do nothing after scrambling to the top of this cliff area, and just sit there and I actually prayed and had fellowship with God at the top of this little rocky outcrop in the Rocky Mountain National Park out in Colorado. And even though there wasn't there's no other people there, I couldn't even see the cars parked down below at that point. There's just this snow-colored mountain landscape up there. Even though it's March and it's 50 degrees, there's still 4 feet of snow in the higher elevations in areas. I mean, what a wonderful moment. I mean, at that moment, 12,000 or 10,000 feet up in the air, maybe just a little bit, it's kind of like the conversation with God took a little less time to get there because I felt closer to him.
Right. And what Eldridge talks about in this is sometimes we miss those moments.
But beauty, I have to say one thing about it though, okay? Yes, it was a beautiful surrounding and a scenery. And you can sit there and say that about just about anything that strikes your fancy visually. But
Right.
beauty was also experiential, because I saw and felt beauty when I was lying there in the emergency room with tubes and wires stuck out of me staring at a fluorescent light fixture, and there's Rachel sitting there next to me just holding my hand throughout the whole thing. She didn't have an answer. She didn't have the cure. She didn't have the treatment. She didn't have any profound words to say. She just sat there, held my hand, and said, "I love you." Not a complaint throughout any of it. That's beauty too.
Absolutely.
And that's not a beauty though that's necessarily seen with the eyes. That is a beauty felt with the soul. And God's...
But it was also seen with the eyes.
It
You
was,
saw her, and her presence there with you made you go deeper.
True, but my eyes could have been closed, and I still would have felt the same thing, and still
Right.
would have had that experience. And what I'm gonna
Exactly.
sit here and say is that God's evidence, his love for me, was experienced and seen, both in those snow-covered peaks in the Rocky Mountains, and the warm embrace of Rachel's hand around mine in the emergency room. And Geisinger's emergency room is not where you'd expect to see beauty necessarily, but there it is, or the
Right.
endoscopy center. You were there that morning. Remember, Rachel was there with me, and then you guys went, and and I was just saying, it can be wherever you seek it out, and if you reach out for that with your heart. Beauty is something both visually seen, yes.
But it's not only Ken seeing, and what the key is who was pursuing you even through that captive, that scene. There's, as Colin's word, there's something deeper going on there in that scene that you just described.
Well,
And
God's-
it's taking you then to somebody bigger than you. And that beauty, as you described it, took you there. And what happens so many times is we as men don't go there. We for whatever reason, we start to squash that part. And we miss the beauty of all that is around us. And it can be an expression, as you said, it can be in nature, it can be a person who's reading a book, and all of a sudden it's taking them there. You never know when the romancer is going to romance you or I. And So then what keeps us from not being romanced? That's the question we'll talk about as a group, that I think is real key to us where we are, even in this stage of development called the lover stage. And what stands in the way? Why does passion get squashed? And if I had time, I just watched the movie Finding Forrester. Maybe you guys have seen the film. It's a story of a man who was a writer. His name is William Forrester, wrote a book. Brilliant guy, had so reclused himself, didn't want to be involved with the world at all. He had cancer. He was dying, didn't want to be bothered with anybody. If anyone even wanted anything from him, they had to. He had his groceries shipped to his door in the apartment where he lived. His laundry was brought to him. They would take it out. He never left the apartment whatsoever. And then this black boy somehow struck a relationship with Forrester. And what's interesting is this black boy was also a brilliant writer as well. They had something in common. And what was interesting is how they were being drawn out of each other and what was going on in that relationship. And it was the beauty of who they were, but they didn't see it at first. They didn't see the beauty. He saw an old man who was grouchy and didn't want to be bothered with anything, had no idea the brilliance of this man and what he had. And this old man, all he saw was a young punk who shoots baskets outside his place, and he's dealing with the gang and had no idea the brilliance of this young man. But it was just a really neat relationship that drew a person's heart to beauty that was within who they were, and how it drew you into their story as it related. But sometimes we close the door to whatever it is we're being called to. And in this case, it's the romancer who's romancing us. But are we in the romance or not? That's the question. Let's regroup. We'll just group up here. Hopefully you get some of the questions, and we'll start working our way through some of those questions.